like to thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak. I appreciate your time is obviously fairly important, and I don't want to take any more than needed. Jonathan Lovett, I'm a current community board member. It's my very first term. Spent 20 years in the community. I spent 10 years on our local board of trustees at school. I'm involved with a lot of the theatre, sports groups, and a lot of other smaller community groups that are around the area. I've got a family that have grew up out here. I've actually got grandchildren that are now here going to the local school and also down at Tuakau College. This is my first time doing a speaking to submission, so I'm a little bit nervous, and there's quite a lot of you I'm staring at, so it's quite daunting. Normally I only just deal with one customer at a time, and it's quite easy to talk to, so it's quite a bit different. So taking that you've read the submission, what I've got is I've got some notes here that I'm going to read from because that way I won't get lost. And so the first part is just really overviewing the wards and the councillors aspect, very brief on that, and then I'll go more into more detail about the piece that I'm personally involved with. So regarding the proposed structures of the wards and the councillors, it's my personal opinion. It feels that it's a bit short-sighted as the entire region is seeing a significant growth. And with the percentage allocation being so high, it feels like the growth factor is being put aside, not considered to the degree that it possibly deserves. And again, I feel that the consideration should be made for the longer term future, regardless of what may lay ahead. And I would like to urge that the consideration be given for proper consideration of enhancing the coverage, particularly up in the northern region. We feel it just feels a little bit not quite there. And you know, I mean, I don't have all the figures and I didn't have all the stats, and I can't sit there and play with numbers. And I probably would really enjoy doing that, to be honest. And given the opportunity, I'd love to sit there and play with numbers, but I have to just sort of take it as being what's there. And I understand that you've got little squares that you've got to play with, and the numbers have to be relevant to those. And I certainly appreciate that. But I still think that given this is a significant area of growth, and we're hearing this all the time from all channels, we should be maybe considering that a little bit further. You know, there could be those percentages could be outside of where we are within 6 months, for all I know. My personal point on the whole thing is more to do with the community board aspect, being a community board member and also representing the Onewhero community. Our local community has always relied heavily on Tuakau for many supporting aspects, and we've always contributed to this. And I find it hard myself to understand why our input is fairly, in theory, no longer valid, whilst we still need to use the township, and we use the parks, we use the reserves. You know, we actively have always been part of this over the years. However, in saying that, look, I do understand that growth is happening, and in some cases, structures need to be readjusted. So I'm not blinded by the fact of what I want. I have to respect the fact that things change, and that's always a consideration that needs to be. The northern communities, I've also noticed over the years, have voiced their concerns about feeling too far away from the council. And I think this is an opportunity to have in place a Northwest community board for those communities that are prepared to be part of one. You know, Onewhero has been part of a community board for many years and fully understand the obligations for this that are associated with this, and engagement around the surrounding areas has also been aware of these obligations, and those that we've been speaking to so far are prepared to consider this for the future. I see this as being a logical strengthening of the relationship between the regions and the council, and the townships themselves have also been growing, and it's important that we're a part of the strategic plans that the council consider for the future. And by being part of the community board, it means that there is an obligation on both parts that we make sure that we comply and we provide good feedback to you. I guess this is the biggest part of it, is that I think that the communities want to provide good feedback, and they want the proper mechanism to be able to provide that effective feedback. Now, going on a bit further, a solid structure is the key to any success, and any successful business person will tell you that the establishment of a community board, you know, they would see that as being a good structural proposal to being able to be a good key to success. One of the, I guess, you know, structure is important in any organization, And if you've got the correct management structure effectively in a corporate business, your business is going to be successful. And a structure where there's a responsibility back through to council from a community board, I think allows the people to represent that correctly back through. And they've got that good structure both ways. And it means that communication will be that much better. So I guess you could go on for hours on it, but I don't need to. I've put it in my submission, and I know you guys have read it, and I know you guys have probably got hundreds of others to read as well. But at the same time, it's about, from my perspective, personally, I've enjoyed being part of the community board. I've enjoyed being part of other people being part of it over the years. My community's reached out to me and said, this is what we want. I mean, we've experienced it for many years, so we understand what is involved with it, and we understand what is required for it. The surrounding ones that we've spoken to, or people from those that I've spoken to, are aware of the obligations that are associated with becoming a part of a community board, and feel that their communities would certainly consider that. And I think it's certainly worthwhile a full consideration on your part as well to let us to move forward, support the community, and put in place something that it's requesting. Any questions?
Thank you, Jonathan. Well done. And I know it's strange doing the Zoom, and I highlighted to the councillors this morning that people will feel a little bit intimidated by this process. But at the end of the day, it's the only way we can actually manage it at the moment, because you're in level 4 and we're in level 2 down here in the Waikato. So the only way we can do it is by electronic means. So, but then, hey, look, just one question for you, Jonathan, before I go to one of my councillors is, it's been mentioned around the possibility of a board on either side of the river, using the river obviously as a boundary, one that encapsulates that area that's already part of a community board, and creating their own one on that side of the river. What's your view on that?
Look, as I say, and I've said that in my submission, I'm not adverse to that. In fact, if that is as I say, if there is a need to change things, then I don't have an issue with that proposal. And if we could form one on this side and use the Waikato as the natural boundary, then I don't have an issue with that. And I've already engaged with a few people from either side of the Onefura area in the community and a little bit further down, and they're of that same understanding. It could be beneficial. It is a shame that we don't have the contact with the Tuakau community, but that again, that is actually it's just a namesake now. Then it's really up to us as community board members to make sure that doesn't get affected, and we can make sure of that by keeping contact with other community boards to make sure that we're working together as a team anyway.
Yeah, okay, good comments. Okay, now I was just looking at something else. Councillor here.
Oh, thank you. And thank you very much, Jonathan, for your submission, and well presented. Just basically, the Mayor has taken the question right out of my mouth and obviously supplied the answer to that. But do you think my question being, if we were to have a Western Community Board here, do you think we would have those people, would we have enough people putting their hands up to actually stand for that community board?
Yes, I believe so. And I think it's a little bit about education. If people understand what they're actually able to achieve and what they can do with that, with the tooling that is surrounding the community board, I don't think we'd ever have an issue with that. I think part of the problem with it, and you see it yourselves within election year, I mean, the amount of people that turn up for elections and actually vote is limited. And I think it's a lot to do with people just really don't understand. And it's about us being out there and talking to people. I mean, if I talk to people about the purpose of council and what you guys do, certainly they start to change their tune because they're now understanding, they're being educated as to what your functionality is. And so once people understand, they're fully informed and they're prepared to make a decision and do something about it.
Mm.
Good. Thank you, Jonathan. Hey, look, I'll conclude at that. We're out of time and I've got people in the waiting room. Look, but certainly appreciate you coming on and submitting to us. And yeah, really worth listening to you.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate your time, all of you. Thank you.
Well done, Jonathan.
You'll do a good job. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Appreciate that.
All right.
Rightio, we have
Marae from Waikato Tainui, page 185.
Okay, let me get to 185. There, rightio. Where's Marai? Oh, she's there. You there, Marai?
Kia ora koutou. Yes, I'm here.
Oh, that's good. Good to see you. Good to see you. I think you've probably done a few of these and been at the other end of these, so I think you know the story here. So you take your submission as read and 10 minutes and for any questions as well. So away you go.
Kia ora tātou. Ngā mihi nui kia koutou katoa. My name's Marae Tukere, and I'm making this oral submission on behalf of Te Whakakitenga or Waikato Incorporated, more commonly known as Waikato Tainui. We are the post-settlement governance entity for the Waikato iwi, and we consist of 33 hapu, 68 marae, and we manage the assets for benefit of over 79,000 registered tribal members. Our rohe, our tribal region, is bounded by Auckland in the north and the King Country in the south, and extends from the west coast to the mountain ranges of Hapuakohe and Kaimai in the east. Council's heard previously from us in relation to a number of matters, and we acknowledge our partnership under our joint management agreement, which was a result of our river settlement. The guiding principles within that agreement include acting in a manner consistent with Te Tiriti o Waitangi and ensuring early engagement and a no surprises approach. As we've referenced in our submissions, we have raised some concerns with the engagement on this matter. Representatives of Waikato Tainui attended a hui at our college, along with other mana whenua, to have a general discussion. There was very little notice of this hui. We want to remind Council once again that early engagement is vital to ensuring that our iwi members have the opportunity to input effectively to important kaupapa such as this one. As per our submission, fundamentally, Waikato Tainui does not support the imposition of boundaries across our tribal rohe. Councils and Crown agencies have imposed a myriad of artificial boundaries on the rohe that cut across whakapapa, whānau and hapu connections. Many times these boundaries are inconsistent and do not reflect the communities they're supposed to support. For example, in the Waikato, we're subject to council, DHB, police boundaries, all of which are different, and none of them have been developed with iwi. In our written submission, we provided feedback under the heading set out in the statement of proposal, and I'll go to those now. Communities of interests. The definition of communities of interest for us was unclear, and the supporting documentation didn't provide any clarity on how the new proposed boundaries were decided. Our communities of interest are defined by our whakapapa links to our marae and hapu and natural landscapes across the Waikato. These links provide us with genealogical connections to specific places in the Waikato. Until Waikato District Council provides clarity on their communities of interests and includes iwi-defined communities, e.g. hapu, marae and landscape connections, we will remain neutral on the proposed new ward boundaries. Effective representation. We acknowledge Waikato District Council for adopting Māori wards. This is a positive step toward more effective iwi and Māori representation. Under Te Tiriti, true partnership and effective representation would be reflected through an equal number of Māori and general wards. We note the proposal for 7 wards and 2 Māori ward councillors elected by one district-wide ward. In our submission, we pointed out our concerns with this proposal, particularly in terms of the Māori ward councillors being able to effectively represent the district. General ward councillors, by contrast, have defined in specific areas an associated population which anchors their representation. We have referred to the large population numbers that Māori councillors will be expected to represent. These are real concerns for us, and we've provided suggestions in our submission for how council could respond to this. We note that it will be difficult for Māori ward councillors under the current proposals to participate effectively in community boards and committees across the rohe, and we're concerned that council did not attempt to provide another option for representation for Māori wards, except for the at-large option, and suggest that this work should have been completed by council staff to provide an alternative. We suggest that there could be an informal arrangement in regards to representation for the Māori ward councillors. We've outlined that in our written submission, so I won't go into the details here. Lastly, we want to raise the Manga and Māori roles, even though they're not part of the review. We believe these roles must be retained along with Māori councillors. We see Māngai Māori as a further mechanism to assist to achieve effective representation of the Māori community in the Waikato district. We understand that the roles of Māngai Māori are at the discretion of each new mayor and council, and we suggest that council could consider a new schedule to the joint management agreement with Waikato Tainui to embed Māngai Māori into the structure of council. In addition, we suggest that the council should consider whether further at-large wards should be established to provide voters of the Māori role with more opportunities for representation other than what are currently provided. In conclusion, we don't support the delineation of the Waikato district where it does not take into account marae hapu and landmark connections, so we will remain neutral on the proposals for the new wards. We suggest that establishment of genuine communities of interest might be better achieved through a thorough review of community boards and committees, including possible establishment of new community boards where the population in the region is increasing. We would have liked to have seen an alternative option for the Māori ward from the council, but in the absence of that, we suggest that the Māori ward councillors may wish to consider a north-south representation arrangement, which might assist to alleviate the issues of geographical spread, local involvement and representation. And working in this way may also assist to provide better options for consideration in the next representation review. And finally, we ask that Waikato District Council consider a new schedule to the joint management agreement with Waikato Tainui to embed Māngai Māori into the structure of council. That ends my oral submission, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Marae. I've got one question here. So as part of your submission, you provided a map of the Waikato district with a ward boundary, I suppose might be. Is that the one that I challenged Shane and some of the team to do with Anton? Is that what they came up with?
Correct. We utilised that work because it was work that had been done, and it was just as an informal demarcation, I think, of the district from that north of Taupiri line. Yeah. And a suggestion that that could be a way that the councillors could operate informally to figure out over the next 2 terms how that might work.
Okay, so it's not necessarily population based.
I think what they tried to do, my understanding of the work that they tried to do was that the north of Taupiri, I think the number was 7,900. Population on the Māori roll north of Taupiri, south of Taupiri, 6,929. So I understand that there's a ratio that you have to work with, and I think that's about as close as they got there. That was my understanding.
Yeah, so you can probably understand how difficult we thought it would be trying to do it too. So yeah, interesting got there. Okay, I've got a number of speakers here. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, and thank you, Marae, for your presentation. You've heard my support in the past for Maori wards. One of the issues in supporting this for me was that Maori would come back to us, particularly Waikato Tainui, and tell us what was best representation format for Maori. And rather than try and tell Maori, as we have for generations told Maori what's best for them, relying on Maori to tell us what's best for them and what wards. And so the informal split that you've got there in your submission is not equal, and it's possibly slightly outside the plus or minus 10%. So if that plus or minus 10% could be identified within the realms of the ratio under the legislation, would you prefer that we considered that option, north-south split, such as you've outlined, as opposed to just leaving it as one and then being informal? I'd like to know a little bit more detail on what Maori would actually like.
Well, obviously, Councillor Smith, I can't speak for all Māori in the district. What we're trying to do is present an option that would work for those 2 people that are going to be brave enough to put their name up to represent all Māori across the council, along with the other councillors, which we understand that all the councillors have a responsibility to present the whole community. So I think if you read our submission, we said that if these 2 councillors have the whole have the whole district to represent, so they need a little bit more resourcing, or we made some suggestions in that space. So just thinking about the support that we could possibly provide to these two brave people. Yeah, that's something that we'd like to see informally only, because we don't want to box them in, like you say, and say this is how it should be, but we suggest it's an arrangement that could be an informal arrangement. Obviously, when the people come in, they might have their own ideas depending on where they're from, because one of the situations we might get is that both of them are from Ngarawahia. And so we need to make sure that there's a fair representation. So it's something that we think the council could consider as an informal arrangement only, and give us these 3 years to review that and see whether it's working. And if it's not, then we could do some adjustment in another 3 years, because I understand you can't make changes for another 6 years. Is that correct?
No, we can make a change earlier if we want to, but we have to do it every 6 years.
Oh, right. Okay, thank you. Yeah. So we're not saying put the line on the map, but we're saying in terms of being able to realistically and effectively represent those populations, that might be something that's worth considering.
Thank you.
All right, look, thanks, Mariah. I'm out of time. Sorry, Councillor Patterson. But I think you've probably answered a good question, and I think what you've actually come up with in the drawing was exactly what we were looking to come out of, and I think it may actually help us in our deliberations.
I'll give Maro a ring and ask her the question.
Yeah, okay.
I see there's a comment in the chat from Anton as well, that the 50-50 and within the 10%. So that's
good.
It is.
Yes,
it works.
Yep.
Oh, good.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, it does.
Thanks, Mariah. Appreciate it.
Kia ora tātou. Ka kite.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Rightio. Galen, next one.
So we have Rosemary Costa, 2030, page 123.
Right, we've got Rosemary. Oh, she's still connecting. Yeah. Oh no, where is she? Is she here?
Yep, I'm there.
Oh, sorry, Rosemary. I'm looking all over the screen at all these faces trying to find you. I saw you coming on. I just missed you when you got on. That was all. So, hi, good to see you. Okay, so take the submission as read, and you've got 10 minutes for submission and questions included. So, knock your socks off.
Thank you. So I understand council's desire is to have community boards for urban areas and that they not cross over ward boundaries. But what I need to understand is why. Why do you feel that urban areas deserve a community board and effectively more representation, but rural areas can just have a community committee or a residents and ratepayers? Why does a town deserve a community board, yet more isolated rural communities don't? And if you're removing the rural areas of a community board, if that's really your desire, why is the OTCB the only board affected? Because I know Raglan has a rural component to it, but that hasn't been proposed to be changed. So does that principle not apply to all community boards? Recognising communities of interest was one of the 3 key factors you put in your document. I just don't understand how you can say you've done this when the current proposal splits the Glen Murray community in half and places some of them in the Port Waikato ward and the rest of them in the really big Hokonui Wairanga ward. And the same has been done to Te Akau. Part is in the Port ward and the rest is in the Raglan ward. So splitting a community in half, to me, completely ignores their community of interest. And I do understand there has to be a boundary somewhere, but isn't on the outskirts of a community better than, for example, the main road? And, you know, I welcome the rural area of Arkak to our ward, but I question how residents of Akaka would feel leaving home, driving through part of Auckland, then through the Tuakau ward, finally over the Tuakau bridge into the rest of their ward. Is council really sure that Akaka's community of interest is with us and not Tuakau? But I do think that's a question best answered by the Akaka residents. As an ex-councillor of the Onewhiro Te Akau ward, I know the challenges of serving a large ward, so the vastness of the proposed Wairanga Hokanui ward got me completely by surprise. The ward crosses the river, the Waikato River, and swallows up part of Glen Murray, who shares no community of interest with them at all. The ward also, in my opinion, would be better served as two separate wards, because from looking at it and from having friends that live in the northern part of it, they all travel north for goods and services to either Pukekohe or further north. And yet the southern part of that ward seems to go to Hamilton. The OTCB has worked until relatively recently, efficiently and effectively, representing two areas who are really closely aligned, and yet we only have the cost of one community board. What's good for us is good for Tuakau and vice versa. The new skate park in Tuakau is a really good example of both areas benefiting from a really fantastic OTCB project. In the 2018 representation review, it was proposed to remove the O from the OTCB. You received approximately 160 submissions against the proposal and obviously saw the Onewhiro community's strong desire to remain. And we thought that had been understood. But yet here we are again, 3 years later, having to repeat our objections to the same question at one of the busiest times in the farming year. I struggle to understand why this has happened when a very clear message was sent by the community last time. This time round, I note your summary states there's 117 objections to the proposed split and 5 supporting it. Is that voice clear enough? At a recent residents and ratepayers meeting about the review, there was lengthy discussions regarding the proposed split, and there's so many unanswered questions that there's no way I can support the split at this point. I initially wanted to remain part of the OTCB, but after a recent conversation with one current elected representative of the board, who told me if Onewhiro remains part of the OTCB, it will be at Tuakau's detriment, I have changed my view. I think the two individuals responsible for originally proposing this split have really damaged the goodwill between the two areas. And they've also clearly failed to live up to the oath they took to serve the community board area, not just Tuakau. My new line of thought is that a separate community board be established for the new Port Waikato ward in its entirety. By doing this, we still retain our direct link to council. And Tuakau can get on. We continue paying the targeted rate to fund the new community board. I also understand that some of the costs of running community boards are covered by council, so perhaps the funding of all community boards needs to be reviewed. I personally don't agree with general rate being used to fund community boards when you know who's benefiting from the community board. And it may also be an appropriate time to review the targeted rate to make sure that it is sufficient, as long as all community boards are treated equally. I have lots of questions regarding the disestablishment of the OTCB. How will everything be divided up? You know, our area has contributed to this board as well. So what's fair and reasonable? What are our options? What's the process going forward? I wonder why none of this was discussed with us earlier, so we had all the facts before we had to make a decision. The whole process seems quite backwards. If you're asking us, you are asking us to disestablish the OTCB, and then we're left with nothing. Your council's proposal states on page 21 in direct relation to splitting of the OTCB, we will meet with the relevant rural communities during the submission period to gauge and collect their views on this issue. I took that statement as saying council would come to us as a community and the other communities involved and hear our views and concerns. So 2 points to raise regarding this. It never happened, not one single meeting to gather our views. Secondly, shouldn't this have been done at the start, right when the proposal was being drafted, if this is the direction we were headed in? To the very best of my knowledge, council has not engaged with any of the rural communities within the current OTCB rural boundary to gauge or collect views. And it just feels really wrong. This may not have been intended, but this is exactly what has happened. And I'd like each of you councillors to think how your local communities would feel if this was done to them. The one meeting that was held was a drop-in session held at 6 o'clock in the evening when most people out here are either still working or driving home from work. And I distinctly remember arriving at the meeting and being firm of a representation review, but that we could not discuss our views on the proposal. That's not engagement. If council wants honest and sincere engagement and ways to constructively get good outcomes for communities, then council needs to be honest and sincere. If you say you'll do it, do it. And I do challenge council to provide any evidence of meetings with our community during the submission process other than actually hearing submissions. So in summary, I support the establishment of a rural community board for the Port Waikato ward. If this can't be achieved, I support remaining part of the OTC the community wants. And I support that both Glen Murray and Te Akau communities are not divided and that they both remain in the Port Waikato ward. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosemary. You probably, in the last 2 or 3 minutes, answered all my questions I had for you. So, in your summary, so that makes it a lot easier, because that's one of the things I would have asked you. What is your view in having a split board on the other side of the river that deals more with the southern side of the river issues, Pukekawa, Onewhiro, Port Waikato, and that sort of thing. So you're obviously supporting that approach.
Well, if there's no room for, I don't have an issue with OTCB. I think they've been really effective. Certainly for issues I've taken to them, they have been. But if we have to be removed from that, then yeah, absolutely support an over the river board.
I'd also like your comments around us should be reviewing the way the community boards are paid for. So you support that we actually seriously reconsult on how they're funded?
Absolutely. Yeah, they have to provide value for money.
Yeah.
There's no point having them if they don't.
Okay, thanks for that, Rosemary. Appreciate it. That was a good submission, and you've raised some very, very good points there. So do appreciate your effort.
Alan, can I just interrupt? I didn't hear the
No,
last.
I'll look way past council. I'm sorry.
It's not a question. It's not a question. No. I couldn't hear what Rosemary was saying, and I need to know what her last comments were. So could they be emailed through for distribution, please?
Okay. All right.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Rosemary. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Sorry, councillors, for cutting it off, but I'm trying to be fair to everybody here on the clock. That went a minute over the clock, actually. So,
yeah, and I don't have a problem with that, Alan. It's just that if I couldn't hear it,
yeah,
I just need to see it, please.
Yeah, no, it's all right. I think I got a fair drift of what she was saying. Yeah. Hey, look, we don't have anybody now. I think, Galen, for next. What is the time?
So you can adjourn now until 1:10 p.m. for. Vern Reeve is actually on at 1:10 p.m.
All right, so we'll adjourn to 1:10, everybody. So go and have a bit of a lunch.
Is this the same link all through?
Yeah,
yes.
Just stay on it.